Welcome to the Earthworks podcast, where our team will share the jargon of carbon from many of our turf friends from the past 30 years.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Really excited to have this conversation with Kurtis Wolford today. Thanks for joining the podcast. And this should be a pretty interesting conversation with the two of us. We've got a lot of things in common and share a lot of off the court conversations about our hobbies and things like that. So Kurtis, welcome. Thanks for joining me, and it should be fun. We got a good list of things to talk about.
Looking forward to it.
Okay, so tell us a little bit, the abridged version. You're at Woodbridge Country Club, which is where?
In Lodi, California, which is about halfway in between Stockton and Sacramento, California.
Lots and lots of agriculture around you. I had the opportunity last fall to pay you a visit, and I couldn't believe how many grapevines and just general ag that I passed on the way in.
Ag is king in the San Joaquin Valley. Which
probably comprises a lot of your membership too, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, we've got quite a few growers and that are members of the golf course.
Yeah. There's a lot of big agriculture there for sure. And you've been there how long?
I've been there for coming up on 3.5 years.
Okay.
Time flies.
Yeah, no kidding. And you were at Cherry Island before that.
Cherry Island before that, and then a couple other stops along the way, as an assistant and the growing superintendent. And yeah, kind of been around all over the place in California.
So in your formative years, you gave me your bio, kind of an interesting, I guess, gateway into the industry. And tell us about kind of where you were on the fence and what you did as far as training before you decided that being a golf course superintendent was really your calling.
So a little bit of family history, like a lot of other superintendents. Grew up on a golf course. My grandparents were members at a couple clubs out of Chico and Lake Almanor, California. My brother, who was a former superintendent for a number of years, kind of got me into the junior golf program. And then from there, it just was kind of off to the races. I was a cart kid for a brief time. And then when the time came where I was able to use equipment, I was hired by a superintendent up in Redding that I'm actually still friends with. He's still a superintendent in Sacramento.
Oh, wow.
So, he was kind enough, Mr. Rick White. He was kind of nice to mentor me along the way. And I really found out that I was a lot better at growing the grass than I was at playing off the grass.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of us kind of found that reality pretty quickly, didn't we?
Yeah. So, went to school. I was up at a junior college up out of Redding, figuring things out. Took a lot of horticulture stuff, which kind of cemented my interest in turf and golf, and managed a little sod farm for a couple of years while I was at junior college, and transferred to Cal Poly and started going to school and working on golf courses while going to school.
And the junior college was, you said, was welding and mechanics?
It was Shasta College. I was there for a little bit of time. Probably a little bit too long.
I don't understand that. I don't know what you're talking about.
I was having a lot of fun taking really fun classes like welding and ag mechanics and ag natural resources and horticulture. So I was feeling things out, which direction I wanted to go. And, doing the sod farm and doing that was a lot of fun. That kind of had my heart doing turf.
Right. Well, in hindsight, though, I mean, some of those other things that you dabbled in certainly haven't hurt you as far as being a superintendent.
Oh, no. I mean, my father was a high school ag teacher for 35 years.
Okay.
So he managed a high school district farm where agriculture kids came to the school, to the facility. And we had, oh God, I forget how many acres it was, but full ag mechanic shop, wood shop, tractors, you name it. I mean, it was basically a farming operation. So I grew up doing this stuff.
Sure.
I had my tractor license early, and I learned how to weld. Oh God, I think it was probably 10 or 13 years old when I learned how to weld.
So would you consider yourself a welder or a tacker? Because I would definitely put myself in a tacker category? Okay.
I had certifications for a while.
Okay. It's
Yeah.
funny. I've met a number of guys that have either stumbled on that or they've gone through that training at one point or another. And man, it's so valuable to be able to do that, because you can't always have, a dedicated wrench around the shop, and pretty handy.
It's kind of funny that I've got a couple welders in my garage at home at the shop that all the neighbors always come to me needing something to be welded.
It's all right. Your hourly rate is, and I can do whatever you need.
I usually just do it for a 6-pack of beer.
Yeah.
It
Perfect.
doesn't take me more than 5 minutes. So here we go.
So, you get the opportunity to go to Woodbridge, and it was kind of a funky sort of transition, wasn't it? Talk about that, because when you got there, you weren't just a superintendent, right?
Well, no, I came in as a superintendent, and then some things happened with management. The existing GM that hired me went away, and then another one came in for a brief stint, and then they were searching for, well, who's going to run the show for a while, and from that, like what a lot of superintendents do, they raise their hands, say, hey, I'll keep the boat going down the river straight. Most superintendents, they know the business of golf,
right?
Kind of by default, with some of our other conversations. And on the property, I had the most management experience of anyone on property.
Because you had done that some prior, correct?
Yes. So working for the previous management company, I had to fill that role twice.
Okay.
Where we had some influx with operation managers and their managers that someone had to raise their hand again and say, hey,
right,
I'm doing that. And, I had enough business experience, and I have worked in this industry long enough where I understand the golf business.
Right. We were talking offline a little bit about how that previous experience with management companies really exposed you to, P&L sheets and kind of the business side of the, a lot of us as superintendents keep our head down, and, you're just trying to keep your staff together and worry about today's emergency. But that's definitely invaluable. And like you said, again, offline, you said, that was very helpful for you to realize how big a piece of the pie the golf course operations is, and the fact that superintendents are probably more qualified than anybody else on the property to jump into that role.
Well, it's like we said offline that, through the educational opportunities we had at school, it was most of us focused just on agronomy.
Right.
We didn't learn the business side of things.
Right.
There's some superintendents nowadays that have the foresight to do the business first and then the agronomy second. But working for the management company really taught me the nuts and bolts of budgets, P&Ls, and understanding that as a maintenance side of the house, being an expense, what we were doing on the course had a direct effect on the success of the business side of the golf course. So
right,
having that P&L training, man, it gave me the background to really understand how things work as a business.
I always resented that. You made that statement. I've always resented that statement that we're a negative on the budget. Yes, by pure numbers, yes, that's true.
Yes.
But I followed a superintendent at a club that, he had coined a great phrase. I think I've used it on this podcast before, that, when it's pouring down rain, is the parking lot full or empty? And that really helps you identify what the true asset of the golf course of the property is.
Well, yeah, I mean, indirectly, we're the ones that generate the revenue.
Right.
Yeah, because everyone's coming here for the golf.
Yeah.
And then everything else.
I've just never felt it was real fair to throw that at a superintendent and say, you're just a negative on the lineup, on the budget. I disagree. We're a lot more than that. So with that, why why do you think, and you alluded to it again offline, and I should have hit record earlier, but why do you think more superintendents don't pursue that that angle of the business, knowing that, there's been a lot of preparatory work in most people's cases to really handle that. But what do you think is the stumbling block to more superintendents not pursuing the role of general manager or some kind of a upper management role?
Probably the first, it's not easy.
Right.
That's for sure. As superintendents, that kind of puts us out of our comfort zone a little bit, for a lot of
Mhm.
guys' comfort zones, where it puts us into situations where we're having to deal with membership, you know, trying to explain to Mrs. Jones why she has a 25% service charge.
Right.
Um, it's that kind of stuff that most superintendents, they don't want to deal with that. They want to get out in the field and grow grass and work
Right.
with the guys and do that stuff. The last thing we want to do is go calculate the food cost of a veggie platter.
Right. Right.
But the for myself, I've always kind of wanted to put myself into difficult situations because that's how I learn the most. That kind of learn by doing philosophy.
Yeah.
That get in the trenches, get your hands dirty, and learn it and figure it out. Um, I'm the guy who's going to stand up and say, "Hey, I'll take it on. I'll do it."
Sure. Sure. Now, do you feel since and I don't want to use this term incorrectly, but since you've kind of moved back into the role of purely superintendent, has that, it certainly helped you personally, but do you think it's helped you, your profile at the club?
Absolutely, because
Yeah.
it gives you instant credibility that you're willing to do anything that needs to be done.
Right.
The membership has been very appreciative, but you know what? It also kind of serves as also a checks and balances, where a lot of the club management has kind of said, "Hey, you're the second kind of person in charge. You're a check and balance to keep an eye on things. Where if things get out of line, that hey, you got to kind of raise up some flags. Say, hey, what's going on here?"
Which could
So
be an uncomfortable position for you, but
totally,
yeah.
totally.
Yeah.
But even if I am here for another 5 years and I choose to go into another place, having that experience
Yeah.
from the business side makes your position a lot more valuable.
No doubt. No
I mean,
doubt.
and marketable for other jobs, even if it's not necessarily in the golf course. I mean, understanding the business component of things, I mean, that could transition into a sales position. That could transition to a ag business. I mean,
Mhm.
there's a lot of things that it could transition into.
Sure. Sure.
So, I look at it as hey, this is a great free education.
Yeah. That's a good
Why
point.
why
Why
I'm
not?
on the job.
Yeah. Plus, it was an opportunity to make a whole pile more money, I'm sure. So it was,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah. Oh,
Hey, would
yeah.
you take this on for next to nothing? Thank you. Appreciate that. Well,
It,
and
uh, doing both roles at the same time.
right, right.
Um, that that was more of an educational experience that I've had in the past, especially at a club that has close to 800 members now, because that really focused my efforts on time management,
Right.
being able to delegate, schedule, because we had so many different components in the business, and
Yes.
especially during COVID. Oh my God, that made it even more challenging.
Well, but that challenge and that recognition has to make you a more effective manager on the
Oh,
golf course too.
at this point in my career, with doing that difficult of a job at that time, I almost feel like there's not much I can't handle that's thrown my way on a golf course.
That's great. That's a really good point.
It's
It's
experience is invaluable.
yeah. Yeah. So if I don't mean to dwell on this, but it's just really interesting to me because I've always felt like, superintendents are more than qualified. It's just there's something there's a mental block or there's something there that, like you said, we like to be out on the, out in Mother Nature and dealing with the stuff that we're really comfortable with. But if the opportunity presented itself in the future to be a true general manager, would you consider it?
It would have to be the right fit.
Sure.
I mean, it would have to be the right fit. And, as with a lot of management positions, you would have to make sure you fill the other positions
Correct.
with the right people to help you be successful.
Yeah, and that's the case no matter what position you're in. You've got to rely on other people.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know several folks that have made that transition, and I don't know many that have said what a mistake that was. They, like you said, they figure it out, but most of them don't regret the move. So it's just an interesting piece of the business that a lot of folks I don't think have really thought about exploring.
I mean, it's with doing this, I mean, this was my third time filling in that role. It through a lot of self-evaluation, it really kind of cemented my belief on what my talents are
Sure.
on the golf course.
Good
I'm
point.
a lot better at being a superintendent than I was at being a general manager.
Yeah.
It's just through my evaluation of myself. I do a better job as a superintendent in navigating the day to day and the planning for the future and all that stuff.
Right.
I'm way better at that than I was with dealing with the communications of the membership, or dealing with all the membership issues, or dealing with the employee bartender issues and all that fun stuff that general managers have to do.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
I learned what my talents were and where my heart was, and that was being mostly on the course.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
it would have to be like the perfect scenario for me to do it full time.
Dealing with the golf maintenance staff is one thing, but it always seemed to me as if the back of the house stuff in the clubhouse would be, man, that would probably break me. I don't know if I could handle some of that drama.
It's an exercise in patience.
For sure. So, all right, let's shift gears. You are currently serving as the president of the California Golf Course Superintendents Association. So I know that's one of your passions is advocacy, involvement. We've talked at length about, the BMP program and how important a program that is for all facilities around the country. So what, shed some light on kind of where your heart is in that regard, and how important. I chaired the BMP committee here in Idaho because I felt as if it was a really important tool for us to try to have in our in our toolbox, knowing that it would be more than likely not a living document, but a really, really important thing when the rubber hit the road. So what's your state doing as far as implementation on the facility level, and why is it important?
Oh, so where do you want to start off, BMPs or more of the government relations side?
Let's go government relations first.
Okay, so the government relations side, I've served as president for the California chapter. I was the president of our local association for a while. That was kind of my first dabble into the government relations during the drought that we had back in 2007, where we had kind of a water task force where
Right.
we were really looking at right in the eyes of a lot of regulations that were looking at golf courses and not a negative light. So
Sure.
through that advocacy group we had generated, it allowed me to kind of dip my toes into advocacy a little bit more. And I was always a horrible public speaker through college, high school. I mean, all that stuff. I was just not good at it, and that something I needed to improve upon.
Sure.
And once again, putting myself into a difficult position that I was uncomfortable is talking with regulators. I always had something to fall back on, which I understand the business and the agronomy side of golf, and I had the ability to convey passionately, sometimes passionately, what we needed to do as an industry to, do our part.
Right.
And, going and talking to these regulators, and, we'll kind of transition to the BMPs a little bit, but talking to these regulators at that time when BMPs didn't exist, we didn't have all the tools in our toolbox to be able to talk to them in the same language.
Right.
Now that we have all of our states have BMPs, what a lot of superintendents don't realize is these government agencies and these politicians, they kind of speak a little bit of a different language than what we're used to.
Sure.
It's because it's a different world. But the BMPs, a lot of industries have BMPs. And that is a language that these regulators understand. So us having BMPs in place, it allows us to talk the same language that they could understand,
right,
and vice versa. So
it seems to me as if it puts us in a much more proactive position.
It gives us the tools to be able to talk to them and have in place that, okay, they look at us now that we have the BMPs as a credible source of information.
Exactly.
Unfortunately, we've always been the credible ones, but superintendents in our green industry haven't done a very good job of communicating how good we are at this stuff.
That's right.
How educated we are. B, the tools that we have at our disposal to manage things the way we do.
Right.
So BMPs are a way for us to convey that we are the experts in this field and that we have programs and protocols in place to do things to industry standards.
So how's the penetration rate in the state of California as far as facility adoption?
It's a slow going.
Right.
I think Florida, has the best BMP adoption right now so far. And then I think it's New York and then California.
And Florida and New York is kind of where all this started, right? I mean, that's the birthplace of the BMP document.
It's a slow process,
right?
We're getting more adoption as time goes on. I talked today for a little bit with a GCSA representative, Jeff Jensen, and then we're kind of shifting our tactics a little bit more as far as how we're approaching the superintendents to get these things done and trying to convince them that it's for all of our benefit,
right,
in the state.
How important is the facility adoption in your view? I mean, your state is in the crosshairs for everything on the regulatory side, from water to pesticides to you name it. And
so for me personally here at Woodbridge, it's allowed us to navigate some pretty sticky situations where 2 years ago my well broke, and there was our other water source was the McColmy River, which was all but dried up. So we had to go to the Department of Fish and Wildlife and apply for a stream bed alteration permit. Well, when Department of Fish and Wildlife comes out to our property and say, "Hey, do you have any BMPs in place?" Well, yes, I do.
As a matter of fact, I do.
I got my binder right over here. Which, when that happened, that gave us instant credibility. They went and looked at the project with us. They never came back.
Wow.
And this was on a stream that has winter run salmon, a fall salmon, steelhead, striped bass. I mean, this is a major river.
Right.
I mean, we got our permit to do this in under 6 months, which is unheard of in California.
Had you not had that binder on yourself, how do you think that would have gone?
There's no way we would have been able to do it.
Yeah. Interesting.
I mean,
that's a great example.
I mean, back even when at my previous courses, I had a couple run-ins with the California EPA, where someone had reported the golf course I was working at, or I just started at, that we were polluting one of the water streams from our wash rack. Well, we had a visit from the local EPA representative, and we walked out, and this was even before I even knew what a BMP was. So this was back in 2005, 2006, where they show up and we go out there and, hey, do you have any BMPs? What's that? So him walking through me the process kind of gave me a little bit of background on BMPs and what they were. And
Sure.
From that interaction with the Cal EPA, we worked things out what our best management practice was. So we weren't doing what we were doing. So that was my first foray into the BMP world.
So it sounds like your experience is similar to what I had experienced, in that if you're proactive and you reach out to some of these government agencies, they're more than willing to help. But if they start knocking on your door unsolicited, you're already on the defensive, and good luck with that.
Yeah, it's always as with all these interactions with regulatory agencies, you always want to be able to come to their table.
Right.
You don't want them calling you to their table. You want to be coming to their table in advance and say, hey, this is how we operate. This is the tools we have in place. This is how we're using these tools to operate at the best efficiencies possible.
So, okay. So if let's say, so Woodbridge adopts a BMP for the facility, you spearhead that. Are you basically handling it yourself? Are you involving other departments within the club? And then second question is, once that document is finalized, which has been set up very easy for a facility to adopt. So once that's done, where do you go next? And this is going to sound like a GCSA commercial, but I think it's really, really important. It's why both of us got involved with it early on. And I think it's important enough that we talk about it.
So I'm the one on the facility that's spearheading it the most.
Right.
It's a living document. Once you finish everything and print it up, it's just not one and done.
Right.
This is something that can be altered and adjusted as things go. And the reason for that is standards change.
Mm-hmm.
The regulatory agencies, like the California Air Resource Board stuff that's coming down the pipe.
Right.
The Department of Water Resources, their standards change for ET values. There's a lot of things that change. So it's important that we have a living document that
Sure.
isn't set in stone, that can be altered for the future for our needs. I've started kind of involving other departments inside the golf course. So like the restaurant, they're working on developing a set of best management practices for their kitchen cleaning and their kitchen operations.
Mm-hmm.
We've expanded that to the swimming pool and the swimming operations, because some of these other industries have BMPs already in place. Like our pool service company that we use for cleaning the pool, they have a set of BMPs. I mean, that kind of blew my mind a little bit.
Interesting. Huh.
That here's another business that runs their management of servicing pools by BMPs.
And do they then perform a service that can set them up for an individual customer, or is it more for their operation that they've got?
Well, it was more for their operations, but I asked to see them, just kind of glance over them to see how they're doing it. And it's their BMPs are set as their business, but it has what's the right word here? It has implications for each individual work site.
Sure. Makes sense.
Which was, it kind of blew my mind that, hey, there's other businesses that this works for them.
Right. Well, it's smart. So what other government relations topics are really hot right now where you are?
Oh,
Pick 12 and let's stick to that.
California.
Talk about water, first of all. I think that's one in your state. My gosh, it's not going to end.
No, it's only going to get more difficult. So we were in drought last year. Our golf course has really, really old water rights that
Right.
pre 1915 that are riparian rights, which are the best water rights you could have in California.
Sure.
For the first time in California history, our water rights were curtailed last year. So we weren't able to pump any water out of the McColmy River, which is our primary source.
Okay.
So
your well is a supplementary source?
Yeah. So
okay.
we're expecting that again this year because of how much rain we've gotten.
Yeah.
It hasn't been enough.
Right.
It's we were going into 2022 in drought. So I think right now we're only at 70% of normal, which isn't good enough to fill our reservoirs.
Right. Which were almost empty to begin with.
Which we're scary
Yeah.
though. I live next to Folsom Lake and I've never seen it like that before.
Right.
So water regulations, we all know that's coming.
Yep.
There's the small gas motor regulations from the California Air Resource Board. That's going to be a biggie. That one's any gas motor under 25 horsepower will be, the new sale of those motors will be banned in 2024, I think. Which has wide,
huge implications.
I mean, not just our industry, but sport fishing. I mean, guides small motors on their boats, power washers that you can buy at Costco,
right?
Weed eaters, blowers, generators. People live up in the Sierras that don't have reliable power, that rely on generators. What are they going to do?
Well, and a lot of it doesn't have reliable power with all the legal stuff going on, and so a lot of people have invested in generators.
Yeah,
which I would hazard a guess are all under 25 horse.
Yeah, so that's coming, but I think there's going to be a lot of challenges to that coming up.
So is that all fuel sources, gas and diesel?
No, just gas.
Okay.
Yeah, that's just gas. There's some other diesel ones that are in the works, but they haven't come to fruition yet.
Okay.
That's coming down the pipe from their resources board. I mean, we kind of see that coming.
Sure. Yeah, I know some counties have already adopted some of that small engine stuff within the state. I think LA County's already on board with that.
Yeah, some of the blower regulations. I get it. We can't stick our head in the mud and see what the writing on the wall.
Sure.
We just kind of have to adapt and do the best we can. Have best management practices in place.
There it is again.
Then just figure it out. Other government relations stuff. We have the Golf Endangerment Act, where there was a bill in place that would have taken public golf courses and given the municipal operators the ability to turn them into low-income housing, those properties. The first version of that got kiboshed in some committee meetings, thankfully.
Was that a statewide movement?
Yes.
It was. Okay.
Yes. So it was refiled under a 1-year bill, which we're still putting public comment in and trying to do the same thing that we did prior to getting the other one kind of going in the wrong direction.
Right.
So it's been really neat on a large attack on golf like that, how cohesive a lot of the golf organizations have been, which is really cool to see. It's to see how everyone is on the same page and putting in their public comments and doing the advocacy that we all need to do for this business.
Did it just happen that way, or have you been collaborating?
There's been some collaboration, but not to this degree. I mean, this has been really cool to see, because I mean we have never had this big of an attack on golf
Right. Right.
ever.
It's huge. It's
I
huge.
mean, public golf courses, that makes over half of the golf courses in California.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's municipal golf that's a lot of golfers' first foray into golf is at a
Exactly.
municipal facility. So, as an operator of a private club, well, almost a lot of our members started off at a public facility.
Yep. You're darn
So
right.
if those public facilities go away, oh boy, we're in trouble.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
There
we're
goes the growth of the
real
game.
trouble.
And
You know,
that may be part of the angle, right?
Well, that it's also the tax revenue that's generated for the
Yeah.
state.
Yeah.
I mean, the golf industry contributes a lot to the state revenues.
Right. Well, if it fails, put me down for one of those low income places where Torrey Pines used to be. I'll take that one.
Oh, I know, right? Could you
What's-
imagine that?
So low income for California, is that anything under 200,000 or what does that mean?
Oh, my.
For the cost of living? What was your gas this morning?
Well, I just got my my fuel bill for the golf course. So we buy agricultural diesel,
Okay.
which is dyed red, and it doesn't
Yeah.
have a lot of state taxes associated
Yeah.
with it. It was at $4.57, which I've never seen that high.
Right.
The gas is $5.25, and that's commercial.
Yeah. Unbelievable.
That's scary.
We're
Blow my budget up.
we're being asked every day to give freight quotes on delivery, and it's like, well, this is good for the next hour because things are changing so quickly. It's driving our general manager insane right now because she tries to handle everything as quickly as it comes in, but it doesn't work that way anymore.
Yeah, how could you not add a fuel surcharge to deliveries?
Right.
Yeah, at some point you have to pass off these increases to the consumer, because as a business you can't
No.
eat it.
No.
Go broke.
I stopped. I agree 100%. I was amazed. I stopped at In-N-Out Burger on my way up to the meeting in Sacramento last week, and I think the burger combo I bought was under $8, but they were high. There was a sign they were hiring for $20 an hour. I'm not sure how. Again, like passing it on to the customer. How do they pull that off? They got to sell a lot of burgers.
I think they do.
That's amazing.
The In-N-Out is a interesting business.
Yeah.
There's a couple of local kids where I live that work for them, that work for the cleaning crews. And for being 20 years old, they make some really good money.
Yeah. I'll bet.
I mean, being on a golf course, we can't compete with that.
No.
That's for sure.
No, and I don't know that, we hear that all the time. I know in the industry, though, whether it's McDonald's or In-N-Out, but by the same token, I mean, that kid that's being hired on with McDonald's is not responsible for a $70,000 mower. So I don't know that comparison is really fair. It probably should be a whole lot more. It's just not.
So, it's a good thing you say that, because I think as superintendents or as golf course managers, I think we need to do a better job of conveying
right
how specialized these guys are trained at using these $75,000 pieces of machinery that are worth twice as more as the car that they're driving to work.
That's right. Yeah.
I've spent a lot of time trying to communicate this to our membership on the need to make sure that these guys are well compensated for, because look at the asset that they're using on a day-to-day basis. I mean,
and I don't know if you've heard Tyler Bloom talk, but he gave a talk in Colorado this last fall, and he had numbers on even at the lowest level of the operation. He had numbers on the cost of turnover and training, and that I don't think that gets communicated nearly enough. So
No.
when you're below market value on the hiring side and you keep rolling through people, I mean, that cost to you and your assistants and everybody that's training, that's astronomical.
So, you said that, and I've written a couple articles to my membership of late where we've had some employee turnover, and most of these guys are members, are business owners, or they're growers. So they have a fine understanding of production standards.
Sure.
So, they get it. They've come to me out in the golf course, say, "Hey, love your article about that. I never really understood that this also, that
It's a business.
standards applies to your portion of the business."
That's right.
And we see it transition into conditioning.
Yeah.
Well, the fairways aren't getting mowed 3 days a week, or the rough isn't getting mowed twice a week. Well, there you go.
It's interesting to me how so many successful business people that are club members seem to do a masterful job of separating their business acumen from their time at the golf course. It's like, no, they're intimately intertwined. I think that's something that they want to go to recreate, and maybe they don't want to be the business person, but it totally transfers.
So that experience with being general manager has helped me be able to convey and communicate those experiences on how they apply to the biggest expense on the golf course, and that's
Sure.
the
Yep. For sure.
So
For
it's
sure.
it's just been huge. It's all about communication.
Right.
If I were to go back to school, I'd probably get either a degree in psychology or a degree in communications.
Yeah.
Because the psychology is learning why people do the things that they do for
Yeah.
employee management, and then the communication is being a better communicator and being able to get things done around the facility.
You're earning your certificate as we speak, so you probably don't need to go back and spend more money on tuition.
No. The California, the Cal Poly got enough of my money.
Exactly. Okay, so get back to the golf course. You've embarked on some pretty significant in-house work since you've been there. Talk about that a little bit.
So yeah, I mean, we've taken a lot of things, once again, raising my hand, doing difficult things,
Right.
with having built a couple golf courses, and done a lot of shaping here and there, and we've really kind of done a lot of things in house, just because at the time, pre-COVID, we didn't have the resources to be able to do some of these
Sure.
modifications to the degree that we needed to do. So we've done a lot of it in house. I had a really good crew. I mean, they didn't really have the training to be able to kind of dabble into this and show them that, okay, if we kind of diversify how we're spending our time, it kind of nets us some time where we could go do some of these bigger projects.
Right.
So it's been a good experience for them to kind of learn some of this stuff and bring them along, and get them some experience on construction, where now that they're seeing how things are built underground, they kind of understand, well, that has a big effect on the quality of the turf that's being done.
For sure.
So them getting the construction experience has made them a lot better employees.
And when I was out this fall, you showed me a very unique source of construction material.
Yeah.
What was that all about?
Well, so the stream bed alteration permit that we had,
Right.
One of the byproducts of excavating our pumping area in the creek, well, because of the water management of our water purveyor, and how they've managed the stream, with the up and down fluctuations of the water levels in the streams,
Mhm.
we get something that's called, this is a very scientific term, but we get something that's called schlupping, where the sides of the banks, which are very sandy, that sand ends up down to the very bottom of the channel
Right.
and ends up washing down into our flood or into our pumping area. So that sand that's very fine and very alluvial. When we got our stream bed alteration permit, we excavated our pumping area and netted out. The first year was about 300 yards of pretty good sand. There was some silt in it the first year. I mean, there's about 1% in the first year. But our second year we did it, it was almost 350 to 400 yards.
Wow.
With less than 0.5%. But because we dug that big pit, all that very alluvial sand washed down. That was a much better quality sand.
Sure.
So we use it for everything, for expanding tees to top dressing fairways to top dressing tees.
It was amazing how clean it was. I mean, there was very little rock or anything really. It was just pretty much sand. It was beautiful.
Yeah. If I were to go back on it again, I would probably get a gold pan on it and see if we could find some gold in.
Not a bad idea.
That could have been a really good revenue source for the club.
That would have been pretty smart. Yeah. So are you working off a master plan or kind of doing in-house with committee involvement and input?
A little bit of both. So we have an older master plan, which I've been kind of going off of.
Okay.
It was kind of abandoned for a long time just because of finances.
Sure.
But a lot of the concepts that the architect did, it was pretty on point. Through my experiences with golf course construction and working with a lot of architects, I've kind of, like a sponge, just soaked in as much information from these architects as far as the why things are constructed the way they are.
Right.
I've been able to use a lot of that kind of training and experience and applying it to some of the things that we're doing on the course. I know a couple really good architects that are close friends of mine that I'll send them pictures of stuff of what we're doing and just kind of reaffirm that I'm still on point on some of this stuff.
Right.
Because there a lot of times when you get a superintendent, they could be thought of going rogue on some golf course designs. Well, it's always good to have the credibility of, hey, this architect is signing off on this too. So that gives you a little bit more credibility.
Well, the rogue thing, especially with the amount of tree work you've been doing, I would think that you could be an easy target for that. So I'm sure, I'm sure you're dotting your I's and crossing your T's as much as possible.
Yeah. Communicating, the why is so huge, especially in utilizing committees for what they are. Committees are a sounding board, and they're an advocate for them to be able to talk to their groups on the golf course.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of guys that are afraid of committees, and I mean, not to say it as a bad thing, but they're a tool at the disposal of the management of a club.
Right.
Where they're there to help you communicate effectively to the other groups on the golf course.
Yeah. Provided you've done your due diligence in the first place so that they know what to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We just broke ground on a $250,000 practice complex renovation where, we went through the committee process and, hey, say, I need you guys to push this design and communicate the positives and negatives to this on what we're doing down there.
Right.
I mean, we need your help. We can't just do it all.
Sure. So when it comes to a vote, if it's a vote type thing, then you've got buy-in, or right away that it's not going to fly, and you move on, right?
Yeah, it's their club,
right?
I mean, they're the sounding board.
Mm-hmm.
Either using them for advice or from a way to kind of go, and the superintendent's jobs are, and general manager, they're there to arm the membership with the correct information and the best way to go out doing things on a golf course. And that's we let them make the decisions for the most part. We just kind of help them steer in the correct way.
Yeah, and that's a challenge for a lot of people in the superintendent role. Especially, I struggled with it sometimes. The lines are blurred between ownership and your perceived ownership of the property, and the fact that no, you actually answer to and are paid by a group of members that have a far bigger stake than you do in it. You're more on the implementation side. That can be a struggle, I think.
I don't know if I necessarily totally agree with that, because I think a superintendent is a steward of the property.
Sure.
And what I've tried to really convey is, I'm vested into this property.
Yep.
I've made a commitment either contractually or, give them, my word that I'm going to be here for a certain portion of time.
Yeah.
And showing them that I'm vested into the success and how the club is operated, that's huge.
Right.
And that shows that, I've got skin in the game.
Yeah. And that's important. That's important. No question. I think where it crosses is, and I did this as a young superintendent, where I crossed the line was, no, this is my golf course.
Yeah.
No, it's not. You get that idea right out of your head as soon as possible.
Yeah. That's a good lesson.
Yeah. Okay. So I told you this would fly by. We're like 6-7 minutes away from an hour, believe it or not. So the most important subject, got to talk to you about woodworking for a little bit. We're both pretty passionate, and you've kind of spun off a little bit of a cottage industry in your downtime in the evenings, which I think has probably gotten a little more than what you expected out of it. So what are you up to these days?
So I kind of grew up woodworking with my dad.
Right.
He had a business where he used to carve wood decoys.
Okay.
For a number of years.
You told me that, yeah.
And we went around to craft shows and sold these. And my mom did a lot of the wood burning, found the feathers and the painting. So it was kind of like a family thing. As a young kid, I was the sander.
Just go somewhere else and do that.
I had to do a lot of the hand sanding.
Yeah.
So I grew up doing the woodworking. It's always been a way of me kind of getting some alone time, some therapy in the garage.
Sure.
Having a preteen in the house, it's important that I get away and get in the garage for a little bit, just to kind of check my brain and do something productive.
Especially a preteen who's a girl. I don't know anything about that in my family, but I understand it's far more challenging.
Oh, it's the most challenging thing I've ever dealt with, even compared to the membership.
Yeah.
So, started doing this. I've made all my wood furniture inside the house, and I just started to kind of figure something. Yeah, why not make cutting boards?
Right.
It's something easy to do, and I always see these artisan cutting boards for sale for all over the place, and yeah, I could do that. That's easy. So started doing it. Got some exposure on Twitter for the most part, and then kind of did some Instagram and Facebook. I didn't really, have a business per se,
right?
Although it morphed into going that route with getting a business license and doing all that fun stuff.
Pretty quickly.
Yeah,
pretty unexpectedly.
It kind of blew up real quick, where I was really scrambling to try to figure out, okay, how am I going to produce an order of 60 boards?
Right.
With a deadline. I'm in the middle of summer. I'm supposed to go on a trip with my family for a vacation. I got to get done before this date. How am I going to do this? So it kind of, once again, it brought me back to time management.
Yeah.
Thinking outside the box, or how could I do bulk things and then cut things down to the size that they were supposed to be.
And how do you delegate the sanding to your son now, just like it was delegated to you? Right?
Yeah. That hasn't gone over too well yet.
And then one of the positives with especially your tree management program has been, you're turning out a lot of slabs that you're then turning into accessories for the golf course. And I think that's such a cool, not only a give back, but kind of an olive branch for the folks that don't necessarily want to see the trees going down. But
yeah,
what a great story.
the resource management component of that has been really cool
Yeah.
to see.
Yeah.
You know, we've had to cut down quite a few trees that were either diseased or just trees damaging infrastructure. That, those trees that if they were good enough shape, that, we cut them, harvested them, and slabbed them up. And, this last winter, we turned them all on the benches on the golf course.
Right.
We're saving. I've got some really big slabs of oak that we're going to end up making some king's table for the restaurant,
Nice.
which are pretty cool.
Beautiful. I've seen some of them, just beautiful slabs.
Yeah, it's working with big slabs is it's a challenge.
Yeah.
It takes a whole different skill set than making a cutting board.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think I definitely think it's a nice thing for the club to see that those things are being repurposed. And a lot of species selection out there was not the greatest, and so just cleaning some of that up has had to have cleaned up the corridors quite a bit. I can't wait to see it again.
I've there's been a bunch of members that have come back because of the cost of redwood in California is so off the charts.
Mm-hmm.
So they come and say, "Hey, I know you guys have cut a bunch of redwoods out. Could you save some? And can I buy some slab stuff from you from the golf course?" Yeah, sure. And it doesn't really cost as much employee or hour wise to have a guy slab up a 8-foot redwood tree,
sure,
and then sticker it off to the side of the yard, let it dry, and tell the member he can come pick it up whenever he wants.
Yeah,
that's a pretty cheap source of revenue.
The GMs had to create a new line item, right? Miscellaneous lumber sales or something like that.
Well, that's a little. I don't know if I want to get into the lumber business. But
I know
too much of a conflict of interest. So
yeah, I know some of the clubs back east where there's a lot of hardwood on the property, and they've done a significant tree management program. They've funded a lot of the projects through the sale of the timber.
True. I made some phone calls to some of the lumber companies around in California, and I've inquired about that. Especially like on the redwoods.
Right.
They won't touch them.
No.
I mean, the reason being is because they've got too much sapwood.
Right.
Since these trees have had so much water,
irrigation, right?
They develop too much sapwood and not enough heartwood.
Yep.
Where it's not worth it to them.
Yeah. Yeah. I found that with pine up here, that it just grows too quickly with that much irrigation.
Yeah, we've got some really big, redwood trees that are just massive.
Right.
I mean, I've had to use a 50+ inch bar to get through a couple of these, which is a whole new experience in itself.
Yeah, if any of you are listening and want to see some of the stuff he's got, you're at Wolford Woodworking on Instagram, right? And then Kurtis Wolford too, right?
Yeah, and then Twitter. I do a lot of stuff on Twitter.
Yeah,
the golf community on Twitter is so cool.
Yeah.
I mean, I learned so many little tricks or what other guys are doing on Twitter. That it's such a cool resource.
Well, you were one of the inspirations for me starting that Woodwork as a Turf Twitter page, just because there was such a little subculture of turf heads that were doing woodworking on the side. And I thought, there's probably a need for this, and it's been a great line of communication for all of us that are hobbyists.
There's some really talented guys that are doing some really cool stuff.
Yeah.
I take some inspiration from some of the stuff that they're doing.
Jeez, that guy, Murray Guitars, holy moly, is he talented. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, it's fun. It's been interesting.
It's even fun that I've gotten a lot of messages from guys that say, "Hey, I really like what you're doing. I'm starting to do some of that kind of stuff now too," which it's cool to inspire some other guys doing stuff.
No question. So we're out of time. What before we log off, what you got any words of wisdom or anything that you want to add to the conversation?
I'd probably say, if any superintendents out there, put yourself in challenging situations. You're going to learn a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, it's invaluable for you as your career, because the things that you learn by putting yourself out there will help you in the future.
Yeah. Armin Suni was one of my mentors, and he was on a consulting visit one time in Arizona at my club, and things were not fun at the time politically. And he said, "Hey, you spending some time in the pro shop?" And I said, "Boy, not as much as I probably should." And his advice, and it goes to your time as a GM, interim GM, and all that. He said, you got to get your butt up there because they can't shoot you in the back if you're facing them. And in our business, boy, one of the best pieces of advice I've ever had. And it holds true no matter what business you're in. So
be invisible is huge. You can't go around hiding your office anymore.
That's exactly right. Curtis, I appreciate the time, and it's been as usual, it flies by, but it's been a good conversation. Hopefully
it's awesome.
Gets a few tidbits out of it. Stick around and we'll wrap up. And thanks again for joining us all this week. If you aren't subscribed already, make sure you do so at Earthworks Turf, anywhere you get your podcasts, and we'll see you next week.